Well, look, it's excellent to have you on, Joel, for sure. You've been nothing but so kind every time we've talked, and so happy to have you. I want to start off, obviously, by introducing Joel to you all. So, Joel Grade, Joel became Cisco's executive vice president and chief financial officer in 2015. He began his career at Cisco as a staff auditor in 1996 and has since held a variety of senior finance and commercial roles, including chief financial officer of Cisco Chicago in 2002, followed by chief financial officer of Cisco Canada in 2007. He was later promoted to president of Cisco Canada in 2010 and then became senior vice president of food service operations North Region and Canada in 2012. In 2014, Joel served as Cisco's Senior Vice President of Finance and Chief Accounting Officer before being named Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. Joel earned an undergraduate degree in accounting and finance with a specialization in international business from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and an MBA in finance, strategy, and marketing from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. And as I said, we're very fortunate to have Joel here today. Joel, thank you so much for joining us and, being willing to talk to all of our full-time MBAs and MS business students that were able to join today.
Well, thanks again for the introduction. And it really is wonderful to be with all of you. I said to Richard, I really, truly love these opportunities. I feel very much that, the education that I've received has been a really great gift, and I think the opportunity to give back and to spend time with all of you is really a wonderful thing, and I'm really glad to be here. So thank you for having me. Look, I'm going to start off with just giving I'll talk for a while, and then what I'd sure love to have is some back and forth with all of you. So please, we'll leave some time for questions. If at any point you have a question along the way, obviously I'm sure there's probably a chat in this whole thing, and you can certainly let Richard know that as well, or just call it out. But look, I wanted to first of all just say it's unbelievable how time flies. It seems like yesterday I was actually sitting in my own MBA program, and sitting there and listening. I always thought, gosh, these guest speakers that they always had. That were really cool, and they had all these experience, and I thought to myself, good God, how am I ever going to learn all the stuff that they know? And clearly I'm sitting here today, and that certainly didn't happen. But nonetheless, it's just a wonderful. It's really fun to look back and put myself in all of your shoes, and the incredible opportunity you have in front of you. The other part, I would say, just congratulations to you all for being in this wonderful program. This tremendous opportunity that you've taken, again, to participate in a fantastic business school, and taking the opportunity to further your own education. So I couldn't congratulate you more for that opportunity as well. So let me start by giving you a brief background on Cisco. And we're one of these companies that I always refer to as sort of one of the biggest companies that nobody ever has heard of. We're the number 2 size public company in Houston, actually. Our revenues pre-COVID, and I'll get to that a little bit later in my discussion. We're actually in excess of $60 billion. And no, we don't sell routers. I actually have met my counterpart in Cisco Systems, and she says to me, good God, everybody always asks me, tells me we have great looking trucks servicing restaurants. And I said, well, that's funny because we often get asked talked about the routers that we sell. So I guess the Cisco and Cisco thing is quite entertaining. But again, our industry now, and we've got a little video for you in a second to give you a little bit of color on the company. But just at a high level, our business is about servicing food service operators across the United States and in 13 countries around the world. We sell. 62% of our business is in the restaurant space. We sell to hotels, we sell to sports stadiums, we sell to hospitals and government institutions. And guys, if you love the food at Texas A&M, it's probably sold by Cisco. If you don't like it, it's probably sold by U.S. Foods. I'll just say it that way. But nonetheless, we've got a whole variety of places that we actually serve as part of our business. And it's a really interesting, we're half a supply chain logistics company, and we're half what I'm going to call a foodie company, a sales and marketing. We've got really both of those things, and it really makes our business a lot of fun. So Richard, why don't you just roll the video for a second and just give people a little bit of just a perspective on Cisco, and then I'll pick it back up after that.
Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a little bit about Cisco. Again, it's a really wonderful place to work. Again, I've worked there now, obviously, since 1996, which seems like a really long time ago. But at the end of the day, the number of, we are about the purpose of our company. Again, this is different than the mission and the vision, but the purpose of our company in so many ways is to help our small business customers be successful. And I think that's one of those things that, we can, as so many of our employees can really get their head around, that we're actually helping our customers succeed, and that's ultimately what drives our people each and every day. So again, what I'm going to talk about a little bit later on is just a couple of things about being agile, being flexible, being nimble during a crisis that has just dramatically impacted our business. And at one point, our business was down 60% in the middle of this crisis, because as you can imagine, being in the business of hotels and restaurants and sports stadiums and all that other stuff, not the best place to be during COVID. But again, I'll save that for a little bit. So let me just talk for a second about just a little bit of hey, what does a CFO do every day? And, obviously I'm still trying to figure that out half the time, but from a reporting standpoint, just give you a little bit of a sense of what this role is, and then kind of frame up a little bit of kind of a career journey and a lot of different thoughts around that and leadership perspectives. So, the reporting responsibilities of this job include a lot of the really, start with some of the really traditional finance functions. I have a chief accounting officer that reports to me, where you have financial reporting, you have tax, you have internal audit, some of those things that are certainly what I'll call the traditional functions. I also have what's called global business services. So at Cisco, we have a lot of the work that is done in sort of what I'll call back office and support functions is actually done centrally, even though despite across this very broad organization that we have. And that includes everything from sort of finance functions to talent acquisition to master data management to payroll to fixed assets to just a variety of things that are all part of what we call global business support. And that part of our organization actually reports underneath me. I also head up our mergers and acquisitions function. This company, historically, since the time we were founded back in 1970, has done, I think the number is up to about 215 acquisitions. So we do lots of deals. We do large deals, we do small deals. And so part of the growth that this business has done has been significantly both organic and what I'll call inorganic in terms of M&A activity. And that area reports underneath me as well. I have functions like FP&A, which is financial planning and analysis. So all the planning, forecasting, modeling work that handles this throughout the organization reports with me. I have investor relations, so I get a chance. We actually just had our earnings call yesterday. So if you have any interest in that, or ticker symbol SYY, you can listen to me yakking with all our investors and analysts on the earnings call yesterday. And we had a pretty good earnings call actually, despite all things. We beat expectations. The stock price went up about $3 a share, so that's always one of the better days to be the CFO of a public company. And of course, there are days that aren't so great as it relates to that as well. But I'll take the small victories. And then the treasury area. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens during a crisis when your business falls 60%. One of the things that we did was raise a bunch of debt and put a lot of liquidity on our balance sheet. And so the treasury function reports to me as well. And then we have CFOs that are over our big business segments. We've got a CFO that's over our U.S. business, a CFO over our international business, and a CFO over what's called our worldwide hospitality business that actually report into me as well. So just a little bit of a sense of sort of the scope and scale of what happens in that role. One of the questions that I often get asked, as Richard talked about a little bit of my bio, there's this question that, did you think you're going to be the CFO of a public company someday? Did I wake up as when I was a kid and say, God, I really want to be a CFO? I absolutely did not. I had no clue that I'd ever end up in this role. And my career path was very kind of meandering, and I took a lot of different jobs in a lot of different sort of functional areas. At one point, to be honest with you, I had no clue what I wanted to do when I grew up. Some cases you could say I'm still in that situation. But I started out in finance, and then I ended up in operations. And for a while, I thought, hey, this is great. I'm seeing good progression in the operations part of my career. And then I got the call from our CEO that people say, yeah, nobody wants that call. I went from being a senior VP over half the country in the United States to, hey, God, I really need you to be our chief accounting officer. Oof, who wants that call? But but I took it, and in all seriousness, it was a great about a year role where I ended up doing that before taking on this job. But I think there's a couple kind of messages out of all that. And message one is really people get oftentimes just stuck in saying, hey, this is what I want to do, and they try to focus all their efforts and figure out what it is that I've got to do this and this and this step in order to try to end up in this place. I think one of the biggest career lessons I've taken out of this kind of this journey for me is one of these ideas about staying focused in the job, in the role that you're in, and be just spectacular at that role. And I think when I think about how people career develop, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't have, if you have some ideas, hey, I want to do this or try this, that's really great. But I just, there's often this kind of idea that, hey, people who kind of roll up through the organization, who kind of kissed the right butt, or who knew the right people, or who did the right stuff. It's not about any of that, right? It's about just a few really key things. It's just about making people around you better. It's about broadening your set of experiences. It's about going to learning each and every day. It's about taking advantage of the opportunities that you really truly have to learn. And so I think to me that's one of the really important components, like one of the life lessons that I would say I took from this thing is that just be, whatever role you're in, be awesome at it. And focus on that, because the more time you're spending sort of worrying about all that other peripheral political stuff, is time that's being taken away from the focus on the stuff that you really ought to be worrying about. And so that's kind of one of the key lessons on that. Another key point throughout some of this, and I was half joking about this chief accounting officer role, but there was roles, and I'll tell you an example. When I went up to Canada, Canada's a wonderful place. I lived in Toronto for the better part of 7 years, but nobody wanted to go to Canada. Like, I hate to say that. If there's anyone Canadian on the phone, by God, I sure, it was one of the best experiences I had. But one of the learnings out of that is this idea of again, taking opportunities that aren't the popular ones, the things that everybody wants to do. Take those jobs and take those roles and look for those experiences that are actually things that actually have the opportunity to really set you apart, that have the opportunity for you to learn different things. I remember people telling me at the time, like, you're crazy. Why would you want to take that job versus some of the other opportunities that I may have had there? But I wanted to do it. That was number one. It was something that I found that was a part of me. When I understood the opportunity, I took it. And I always think about there's these concentric circles that sort of intersect in the middle. And if there's a place that says, hey, there's a place that you're passionate about and something where there's a need in the organization, that center where those two circles intersect, man, that's the sweet spot. And so take those opportunities that not everybody is just interested in. And the third one, again, is just really around this idea of versatility. Take experiences and think about those things that are uncomfortable, right? Sometimes it's really easy to take the job that says, yeah, I'm really good at that. And I know that stuff, and I know that like the back of my hand. The number of times that I got into roles where I, really didn't know what the heck I was doing with going into it. And I was worried about that. But man, you grow from those kind of things. And so that's just another thing I would say, is just sort of generally speaking, what are some of those ideas about career progression that are some of the lessons that I learned? Now, question I often also get asked is this question: were you ready for this job? So saying all that you said is, hey, you sort of, people sort of, at least I did, when I was starting out as a 25-year-old kid in internal audit after I'd been at Ernst & Young for a couple of years before that. And I looked at our CFO at the time and the company, and I thought, oh man, that guy knows everything there is to know about everything. That couldn't be further from the truth. Let me be a living, breathing example of that. But it's one of those questions that it's are you ready for the job? And it's absolutely not. And that's okay. I'll give you a couple of fun examples of sort of what my first year looked like in this job. And sort of this view that you're never really ready for some of this stuff, but you go for it anyway. So I got this job. I was announced in April 1st of 2015. And right after that happened, we were in the middle of actually acquiring our largest competition. We were the number one in the industry. We're acquiring number two. And we'd spent a company called U.S. Foods. We'd spent the better part of 2 years actually trying to acquire this company and do the integration work and all this stuff. And then the U.S. government said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And the U.S. government decided to kill the deal. And the FTC and the Department of Justice said, that's creating some type of, monopoly situation. Long funny bit of story that came out of my MBA program in this. You guys will just take 1 second detour on this point. Prior to that happening, I'd spent a bunch of time in Washington, D.C. with some faculty members of a number of prestigious universities around this country, teaching them about our industry, because the Cisco was in the court with the Department of Justice. And of course, the U.S. government was arguing, well, this is a monopoly, or it's going to be. And of course, I was arguing that it was not. And so my job was to actually educate a couple professors on what our business was, to be our witnesses to state our case. And so the funny thing is, the guy, one of the professors was actually from MIT, and he said, yeah, this guy on the U.S. government side, is not the smartest guy in the world. He's a professor from Northwestern. And I said, man, what's his name? And of course he told me, and I said, and as it turns out, he was the first professor I ever had in a strategy class at the business school when I got my MBA program. And the great thing about that, I had written a paper during that time about the competitiveness of the food distribution industry. And this gentleman actually gave me an A on this paper. And after spending 2 weeks in DC getting ready for this, I went and found this paper, and it said, man, that feels like an incredibly competitive and complicated industry, blah, 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 blah. He was then, of course, testifying against Cisco in an antitrust case. And so, boy, it's a small world sometimes. But anyway, back to the point. This is one of the first things that happened. The U.S. government vetoed this deal. The deal fell apart. And the next thing that happened is we got a very large activist shareholder that jumped on our board. A gentleman named Nelson Peltz, who's in a firm called Tryon Associates. And so you can look up, they typically sit on boards of really big organizations like GE, Mondelez, Procter, and P&G. So big companies like this. And so that was the next thing that happened. So then my role officially starts in September, and the head of this activist firm says to our CEO, "Hey, how come you didn't hire a real CFO?" That was the next question. So I was off to a really good start here in the first few weeks, and 2 weeks after that we had an investor day that sort of rolled out a new strategy, and it's just a lot of chaos. But my point is the following: those are the type of experiences that you walk into that you're never going to know everything you need to know about every job you went into. I'd actually never been in front of an investor prior to the time when I got named to this job in April of 2015. I've been in front of thousands of them at this point, but then I had never done that. I had never been part of the capital markets work. So all this work we do around treasury, we do, again, work around all kinds of, international currency hedges and interest rate hedges and swaps and fuel hedges and all kinds of really complicated treasury mechanisms that I had no exposure to prior to being in this. But there's a couple, again, important points out of that role. You aren't going to go into any job and sort of know everything. And so don't be afraid of that. The second point of it is it is a wonderful thing to be surrounded by people who are really smart, who really are great about what they do. Some people actually get intimidated by that. In my case, it's not that tough to find people who are incredibly smarter than I am. But nonetheless, it is something that you should never lose sight of. Surround yourself with great people and empower them and let them do their thing. But that's how you learn. Another kind of lesson out of that whole experience is get comfortable with your shortcomings and the things we all have things that we could be better at, right? There's not anything, and that is okay. One of the things that I've probably done in my career as well as anything is ask dumb questions. That is something that a lot of people will get into, and there's sort of a sense of, hey, I got promoted or I got a new role, and somehow there's a view that I should know all this stuff, and they're really hesitant to ask questions. I see this all the time. Don't be that person. Be okay with what you know and be okay with what you don't know. Everybody's got some hole in the resume again, and learn from your team. Teach you. It all this stuff. It makes you human. And there's a huge element to that in terms of leadership, that it allows you to be, again, imagine how good it feels when you get into a new role and the people that are working for you can teach you something. They're all of a sudden feeling like, hey, wow, this is, again, I feel empowered here. And so those are some of the lessons from that perspective that I think as you enter into new roles and you think about new jobs, that I would just be very cognizant of. So next point, I guess, just to kind of, and more on a personal level of this, is that, what happens when you get into the C-suite is that you automatically, people look at you like you have sort of three heads and breathe fire, right? And all of a sudden, people think, oh my God, this guy's the CFO and he must be super scary. And you know what? Who knows? I probably am, but I think, anytime you're in some type of a leadership role where where all of a sudden people view you as you're the leader, you're the boss. And I think there's a part of this that I think, how do you kind of deal with this in terms of, again, other sort of lessons learned on a career journey? It's number one part of this is to be present with your people, right? And one of the things we've learned in this Zoom world, and it's one of the, when at Cisco, it was, we use video conferencing from time to time. We have businesses all around the globe, and sometimes it's easier to do a video conference, but to say it was, something we did each and every day and all the time, obviously is not the case. And part of being present with your people, certainly, again, at any time, but certainly during these times, is just incredibly important. People, the simple questions of, hey, how are you doing? How are things going? Ask open-ended questions. Let people think. Again, be present. Be genuine with people. Don't try to be. So many people sometimes. I've seen so many of these things from my career. People always try to be some persona. This job is a funny one. Half the time CFOs are supposed to be, again, these sort of people that represent like Attila the Hun. And I am who I am. That doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean it's wrong. But it's me. Right. And those are the kind of things that I think, I think just when you think about yourself and bringing your best self to your job and in your life every day, this ability to just be you makes all the difference in the world. People respond to people who are just genuine. People respond if people kind of think, okay, yeah, they've got some, other, motivation going on, and they're trying to do this or they're trying to do that. It's a very different game, but just be you. And I think, and that works both ways. It not only helps you, but it creates an organization where people also feel that way. And so again, this idea of how do you as a leader help your organization, allow people to sort of bring their best self to work each and every day? Again, this is a really important thing. Be humble, be approachable, be transparent, be honest. When you're wrong, just say it. Hey, you know what? I screwed up. In my case, the other thing you also just have to realize is as you elevate through your career, you represent your organization. What you say matters. In this job, it's a funny one because, I say something dumb and our stock price drops 10%. That's not necessarily the best. That's not the case with all people, but you have to realize what you say matters. And what you say to people matters, what you say and how you represent the organization matters. And so I think those are really important things. And then, this idea of what I'm going to call the upside down pyramid, the servant leadership. Leadership is not, we in our organization talk about things that from an upside down pyramid. And I think this is something that's really important and interesting is leadership. People think, well, the leadership sits at the top. The CEO of the organization sits at the top of the organization. We actually flip that at Cisco. We actually have the CEO down at the bottom, down at that little point on the bottom of the upside down pyramid, because all of us in these leadership roles, our job is to help other people succeed. And I think as you think about your own careers and your own leadership, ultimately, those are the type of things that I think are really important to keep in mind. All right. A couple of points I would also make before I get to just a couple of comments about Cisco and the idea of how to be nimble and how to think about how we've kind of navigated through these crises, a few lessons learned. I'd say a couple other things that I often get a question on, and that is sort of what do you see as like some of the kind of key. If I had to say, what are a couple of the key success factors that are just about in everybody that I see as successful people in our organization or in broader amongst the many interesting people I get a chance to meet. And I think the one that to me is this idea of intellectual curiosity. This idea that says, I'm always trying to ask why. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to understand better. That's something I would just encourage you to really think about and think and how it is that I can just continue to learn all the time and just keep improving yourself, going to keep getting better at whatever you do. I think that intellectual curiosity is really, really an important piece. The other thing I would just say, and this is one of the other points I get a lot of, is how do you kind of, what does life look like? How do you sort of manage, I've got a wonderful family. I have a wife. We have 4 kids. We've got a 21-year-old son who's a senior at that. I think there's a school in Austin that's got some Longhorns associated with it that I probably shouldn't talk about in this group. But anyway, he's a senior at the University of Texas. I've got a 16-year-old son turning 17 shortly, a 14-year-old daughter, and life is full of surprises. We have a 5-year-old, and so but it's one of those things that keeps you balanced. And the question is always, okay, how do you kind of balance that stuff? And what I would encourage you to think about is what does balance mean for you? It means something different for everybody. There's no doubt about it. In a role where you fly 250,000 now, not during COVID, by the way, but 250,000 miles a year to all places around the globe. Again, that's balance is different for all of us. But for me, the thing that I've always said is there's a couple things in terms of have something that you can do that just is a little bit of time for you that you can relax and unwind. It's really important. You have to be able to do that. And then the other thing from a family perspective that, again, if I could say the thing that I've learned more than anything is simply to be present wherever you are. And that means when I'm at work, I'm working. When I'm with my family, I am with my family. I don't have my phone going next to me. I don't have this thing, even on vacation. My wife and I have gotten really good at this little bit of routine. I'll set a little bit of time aside each day, in the afternoon usually, and where I'll just do, check what I need to check, make a call if I need to make a call, schedule anything during that time, and the rest of the day, that's it. I'm not worrying about my phone. I'm not worrying about work. I'm not doing those other things. That may not be perfect for everybody, but it's what works for me. And I think the point for all of you is, those are the type of things that, in terms of just sort of taking care of yourself, developing that routine, don't sacrifice your, figure out what the things that you work for you and what don't, and just stick with that. So look, that's a lot of things that are just sort of the views in terms of how I sort of see life and think about things. I want to just spend a couple minutes, if I could, just talking about, just from a kind of a little bit of inside baseball, if you will, about Cisco and how what this company has done to sort of transform ourselves and how we think about what's happened during this crisis. Because it's really been what I'll call it an interesting case study for someday for an MBA program. Again, we do a lot of planning on enterprise risk management, in our organization. One of the things we get the pleasure doing in this job is writing and thinking about, what are all the things that could go wrong in our business, and having some sort of plan for that. I will be the first to tell you that what we did not have a plan for is basically, a giant amount of our customer base all shutting down in every country we're in, all within about a 2-week time period. That was not something we planned for. And so, I woke up in the middle of March and all this happened, and within literally in a week and a half, our business had dropped 60%. Now, this is a business that typically generates a lot of cash. We are one of the strongest balance sheets in the industry. We're what we call a dividend aristocrat, meaning we've got a dividend that we've increased for 51 years. There's only a few companies in the Fortune 500 that have that, but it's just really, again, a sign of financial strength and stability. We had diversification of products, of customers, of geographies. I always looked at our business as pretty diverse until it wasn't. And so those are the moments when you decide, it's time to act fast. And we did a few really key things as part of this. Step one was securing some additional liquidity. And, we have typically not carried a lot of cash on our balance sheet. But we ended up putting a lot of cash on our balance sheet pretty quickly. and it wasn't easy. Within a week of all this happening, we got downgraded by the rating agencies. This is a company that had a tremendously high debt rating, and all of a sudden we couldn't borrow cash. And the banking industry, they love our partners in the investment banks. I always say they're your friends till they're not. And the investment bankers, we're happy to help you. And then we got downgraded by all the rating agencies, and all of a sudden we couldn't borrow. So it was a 2-week crazy run to figure out how to secure liquidity as in part of the organization, and we've done so. Today, we find ourselves in a place today where I have $8 billion of cash and available liquidity sitting on our balance sheet. But that was job one. And if we didn't do job one, there was no job two. All right, so let's be perfectly clear on that. But so check the box on that. We then figured out how to pivot the organization and finding alternative sources of revenues. For example, you may recall at the time this crisis started, everybody ran to grocery stores like it was no tomorrow. And but with about a week and a half or 2 weeks into that, there was no food on it at half the shelves in the grocery stores. And why was that? Well, it was for a couple reasons. Lack of availability of products, and all of a sudden their supply chain they didn't have enough trucks, they didn't have enough drivers, they didn't have enough of anything. And so we, as Cisco, with the second largest fleet in the United States and one of the largest cold chain across this country, partnered with a lot of the large grocers in order to actually help. And it was a win-win for us. We had lots of fresh product that was actually going to go, that if we didn't do something was going to go bad. And we had excess trucks, we had excess drivers, we had excess capacity because our business had just fallen off the table. That's a perfect example of a wonderful opportunity of the ability in a business world to be nimble and to think about, what is the next move on this type of thing. We also, and again, these are tough decisions, but took a substantial amount of cost out of our business. And this is a tough thing, right? We had, and again, we've obviously gotten some of this back since then, but we have 69,000 employees, and during that time, with between some of the work we had to do for furloughs and layoffs, we had nearly a third of our workforce that had to be laid off. It's incredible. And all that work was done in a very quick time period. But more importantly than that, and again, these are people and their lives. And for the most part, again, as our business recovers, we have certainly added a lot of people back in our organization. But where the part that is really important here is never miss an opportunity to take advantage of a crisis. This is, I think, the other part that I would always think about is when something bad happens, there's always opportunity. And so never pass up the opportunity to do that. We have not only managed through this crisis, but we've taken advantage of substantial transformation opportunities. We've done a whole bunch of things from an initiative standpoint. You can hear all about them on the earnings stuff that we talk about that actually are going to transform this business for the better. And so I guess I would just leave you at this point. These are just real world examples, and they're happening today. But these are some of the type of lessons learned in a time like this. And in a time when everything just kind of feels bad, the country's in kind of a weird place. COVID's all over the place. There's just so many issues that are impacting our world today. There are always opportunities, and the ability to find those things, to take advantage of those things. As a leader is probably one of the best lessons we've all learned out of this crisis. So I'm going to stop there. That's a lot of stuff that I rattled off for you today. Hopefully you found some of those things interesting. But I'd sure like to open it up now and take any questions that any of you have. But let's see. It looks like there is a chat. Give me a second here.
Yes, you want me to read it to you?
Thank you for sharing your. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you want me to read it to you, or would you like to read it yourself, Joel?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks for sharing the time throughout these ups and downs. How did Cisco work to maintain company morale, all while remaining nimble? It's a great question. because obviously there's certainly a lot of challenges when I talk about obviously some of the work that we had to do to downsize. But I'll tell you, one of the things we did is that one of the things that we said was a guiding principle of this work. And again, the ability to secure liquidity allowed us the flexibility to make decisions that were right for our business, for our people. That included taking care of employees. So when employees were furloughed, meaning they're laid off through this, we continued to pay their health benefits. We continued to pay a certain, like we actually made a conscious decision in order to make sure that our people were taken care of to the absolute extent possible. And this was something that, again, was not something we had to do. We believed it was the right thing to do. And because, again, so that's probably, I would say, step number one. I would say step number two is communicate. Like there's no, I think at the end of the day, there's a tremendous passion and just simply taking drastic activities without explaining sort of why this is important is something that, again, you have to never forget. And then this is one of the things that I tell people all the time. There's times where you have to make decisions, and so many decisions impact people. I used to have a boss that would say to me, if you assume you have 10 people reporting to you, and if you assume every one of those people has a family of 4, that means you're impacting 40 lives. In the case that I've got a couple thousand people underneath me, that the number of lives that my decisions impact, and in this job, it's almost broader in terms of the organization. That's a huge responsibility. And so when you think as a leader like that, and you talk to people about the why, and you check in with people and say, how are you doing? And you check in, so I think it's some of those small little things. Part of what I would tell you is that obviously people, when we went through all this stuff, there's people upset and scared and all these types of things. But the number of people that said, I get it, and thank you for treating me the way you treated me, that doesn't happen by accident. And it rubs, and people see that within the organization. So I think it's just it's really around so many of those really basic core leadership tenets that you just, in terms of how you treat people throughout all these situations, that really make a huge difference. Okay, next question here. Let's see. Thanks for coming. Appreciate listening to advice about career planning. Can you speak a little bit more what goes into a financial analyst responsibility, day-to-day activities? Yeah, absolutely. So those roles are really interesting. There's a number of different areas that use financial analysts across our organization. We have a lot of them. There's people that actually are supporting our sales organization, and so much of the work that they do is thinking about customer profitability, item profitability, making those decisions. Hey, are these types of lines of business that we should go into or not go into? Are these customers we should take on and not take on? Are these contracts we should renew or we should decide to pass on? There's lots of really interesting work in that. There's analysts that support our supply chain team and that make decisions around thinking about all the different aspects of the really complicated supply chain that we have. We've got analysts that support our M&A team, people that support and that do a lot of really cool modeling work around and integration modeling around mergers and acquisitions, and think about how all those sort of pieces fit together, how much we should pay, how the valuations on deals, and ultimately some of the decisions around how they fit into our organization. We've got teams that support what I'm going to call merchandising and marketing and pricing operations that basically decide, that do all kinds of really cool analytics around, around margins, and both on and I'm going to call it on a reporting side, on a sort of a tracking side, and even in some cases on a predictive side. There's analysts that work on sales compensation, compensation programs. When we make large scale compensation changes, we've got over 5,000 salespeople in the United States alone. And if one of the things that we did during this crisis was we actually did a sales compensation change, which is really hard. It's really hard, but it's not really hard when our sales are down 60% and nobody's earning commission. If there's ever a time to make a sales comp change, it's now. And so many financial analysts are actually doing real work around understanding the puts and takes on things like that. And so I guess what I would say, we've got just a tremendous variety of work and opportunities. And those are just a few things. We've got a strategy department that actually does really cool, I call it the big S strategy work. And we've got, when we start doing really high level models around sort of long-term strategic projects, we have financial analysts assigned to do that type of work. And the last thing I would call it is we've got financial analysts in our FP&A area that do work. Every time when I do earnings calls, the amount of work in preparation for an earnings call or for board meetings or for lots of, type of, interactions I have. So just a whole variety of stuff. Hopefully that gives a little bit of perspective on some of the different opportunities of financial analyst.
Sounds like someone who's looking for a job, Joel.
Here, we need great talent. So you know what? That's a two-way street. Okay, let's see here.
Craig's one of our full-time MBAs. How do you manage the daily stress of having the responsibility over a large finance organization with hundreds, how about thousands of employees, as you said?
Yeah. Well, number one, I don't know. First of all, just remember that the opportunity, which is always to me is incredibly exciting, the ability to impact people. My job in so many ways, I always kid about this, but it's mostly true. They're the ones doing all the great work, and so to me, it's my job to sort of hire great people to set them up for success and get out of the way. And so I think part of this is I take a lot of joy actually in actually seeing in helping and developing people. I really do. And so I necessarily from a stress perspective, everybody handles kind of stress in different ways. But I think for what makes me feel good each and every day is if I know that the teams of people I have are doing really great, meaningful work. They are, again, they're supported, they're empowered, their careers are, people are growing their careers. And I just, it's about connecting with people. I enjoy people, people, there's no job. People think, CFO job, it's like this sort of technical, crazy number crunching job. It's honestly, this job is as much about leadership. It's about communications. It's about all those things far more than it is even a lot of the technical stuff. Because frankly, I've got people in the organization that work for me that are a whole lot better at that stuff than I am. And so it's, I just think the daily, that's really how I think about it, is just if I'm doing the right thing and feeling good about the fact that we've got great people and they're doing great work and they're empowered to do really good things. That's to me what, how I look at that each and every other day, each and every day, excuse me.
Excellent. Ryan Staples.
All right.
You want to do Ryan Staples?
Yeah, sure. Do you ever find people trying to take advantage of your choice to be humble, and how do you overcome that opposition? I think what you probably mean by that is in terms of as I was going through my career, I actually have not. And, it's one of the things that I think is I often that, I think to me, it's about being genuine. And here's the thing I would say. One of the keys to success in any organization, again, is making people around you better. The people that take credit, that decide I've got to somehow raise my hand, and if something goes well, take credit for it. Those are the kind of things that to me just almost always get in the way of progress. Eventually, they just do. And so, the ability to make people around you better, the ability to give, again, to give people credit around you who are doing great work, to never be the one that raises their hand and says, yeah, that was me. People get it, right? If my finance organization is performing well, it's obvious that I've got really great people doing really great work. And then, so I guess that's how you eventually get recognition. But I've not had people take advantage of that. And I just think that And to be totally honest with you, if I was in a situation where I felt that way, frankly, that's when I have to question, is that the right fit for me? I think it's part of developing a career is being in a place where and I said this earlier in the discussion, so I apologize for sounding repetitive, but about being able to bring your best self to work every day and creating an environment where people can bring their best self to work every day. If you can't do that, or if you're in a place where somebody is quote unquote taking advantage of you as who you are, you really need to rethink whether that's the place for you, because you're not going to bring your best self, and you're not going to create the environment where people are able to bring their best self. So I would just say this, that's probably the way I would look at that discussion. Okay, next question. It looks like Shelley. Can you talk about resources you use and rely on for the professional development as an executive? Yeah, sure. So that's throughout the course of my career, I would say it's the people in this job that I use more than anything. And I had my little fun poking our investment banking friends, but some of the people in those industries were some of the most influential people in helping me learn some of the things I needed to learn this job. So, when I was, again, I spent 3 years at Ernst & Young, but to say that, that qualified me to be the chief accounting officer of a company this size certainly would be a dramatic overstatement. But when I was in that job, our audit firm at Ernst & Young was spectacular. And again, I rely on those people to learn. One of the first things I did when I got into this job, Goldman Sachs does a lot of the work from an investment banking perspective for us. And they've got a treasury boot camp that I participated in. They've got an investor relations boot camp that I participated in. Deloitte has a Deloitte University that prior to my going into this job, they actually had a part 1 and part 2 of a CFO program that that was a little bit of a flashback for me. I went through that prior to getting into this job. I've actually gone back to speak a couple times to their CFO program graduates. But the point is, these type of firms have tremendous resources to help develop careers. There's also people that use executive coaches, and I think one of the things that I've actually it's interesting. And again, this goes back to a little bit of a humility point. We have a new CEO that started in February, and he and it was he's a first time CEO, and had not previously, again, done a lot of investor relations work. And he hired a coach and said, hey, I want to really be able to work together well and delivering messages both to investors. We had an interview yesterday with the Wall Street Journal. So there's a lot of media that ends up happening in this job too. And he said, you and I should together get a coach and work and figure out how to just absolutely optimize the way we do this together. So I think, those are things that that happens at all levels of our, organizations. There's opportunity for executive coaches. There's opportunities for those things. The other thing I would say, though, and just to kind of put a bow around this, within your own organizations, the possibility of having mentorship programs or to find a mentor is, I think, a really important part of people's career development and sort of professional development. I've had a few people throughout my career that I consider my mentors, and to this day, those are people I will pick up the phone and call. And if there's something that I'm thinking through and be like, what do you think of this thing? And I've learned so much from those people. And they can be a direct boss, but they don't have to be. There's people that, as you sort of develop a network within organizations, you look for those people that you think, I really connect with that person. And there's things that I see that I can learn. And so that'd probably be the other part of it, despite, some of the professional development pieces. The idea of having a strong mentor and somebody that is able to again, share their ideas and their, talk candidly with you and say, hey, that was good. And hey, what are you thinking there? Is really, really important. So that's probably the other piece of this I would comment on.
Hey, Joel, Aaron Clark wants to ask you a question directly. So if Aaron, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yep, perfect. First of all, Joel, thank you so much for your time and investing in us. I really appreciated your candor and just your humility, like someone asked you about earlier. Secondly, you and I actually have some history. My wife is Melissa Arriaga Clark, and she insisted that I told you hi, so I wanted to get that out of the way. She also wished—
That's tremendous.
It is. She also wished you good luck with getting that share price back up to the 70s or 80s, because she never unwound all of her shares. And the second part is you and I actually sat dinner together 7 years ago in Florida at the Women's Food Forum, the year that my wife won. We just happened to be at the same table. I had zero expectations of you remembering that, but I remember you being incredibly kind. You were in the moment. You were sincere. You invested in me as nothing but the spouse of one of your employees. So y'all, I'm living proof that he walks the talk, and that meant a lot to me. True story.
That is tremendous.
Yeah,
Man,
no,
that's
I do.
tremendous, Aaron. I appreciate.
No, you bet, man. You bet. And I gotta tell you something else. But for the rest of my Aggie alumni and brethren, I graduated 22 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. It's making me feel old. But besides having a great time, I learned so much. And I definitely think that it made it probably the biggest impact on my career. So kudos to all of you investing in yourself. You will have a great ROI down the road. And I've been fortunate to have two roles as a CFO, small little Mickey Mouse mom and shops. But I was smiling when Joel talked about not always knowing what he was doing. I'm living testament to that. That's why you have smart people in professional services. But I also love hearing about great CFOs in action. And Joel, now I'm setting it up for you. Melissa told me a story years ago about you addressing an audience at Cisco, and you had 100 pennies jingling in your pocket. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
So my question is, could you briefly share the gist of that story and what the lesson is that you were trying to teach? Because my wife can't add two numbers together and doesn't know anything about finance, but that resonated with her, and she still talks about the lessons she learned from you. So thank you, Joel.
That's so funny. That actually makes me smile, and I'm laughing because you sometimes never know what you always have an opportunity to make an impact, right? And you don't even realize it at the time. This was what this was I was attempting to illustrate, as big as our company is, the fact that we actually only make pennies on a dollar, right? Some people tend to think, oh, we're a $60 billion organization, and so we've just got money falling out of trees. But our operating income as an organization is less than 5%. And so I actually made this video where I literally had, as Aaron talked about, a whole bunch of 100 pennies, and essentially said, look, I walked right down the P&L. And I said, I started with a dollar bill and our 100 pennies, and here's 81 cents of it goes to pay for the stuff that we end up in our cost of goods sold. And, X amount of it goes into we have to pay our drivers, we have to pay our salespeople, we have to pay, somebody's got to pay those that, sit at the overhead here in the corporate office. And by the time that whole thing was done, and every time I said something, I just moved pennies from here to here. And it was such a clear point, and I ended up holding, less than like 4 cents in my hand. And I think part of the moral of that story, so the point I was obviously trying to create was just simply to help people understand better and put something visual to it about how much money do we actually make as an organization, and sort of what are all the things that go into this thing. But the point of the story, and I think and again, Aaron, I appreciate you bringing it up because it's an important point. Stories or visuals can just go they're so different even than just telling just listening to, somebody rattle off stuff. It's an unbelievable visual, and people that I literally have had hundreds and hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating, of people come up and say, wow, I love that video, or can I get a copy of that video? Or I learned so much from that thing. And so anyway, it was a fun deal. And Aaron, again, I appreciate the walk down memory lane, and certainly the 7 years ago dinner at the Women's Food Service Forum. That's an industry organization that certainly obviously promotes some career development of women in our industry. And it's a great organization. And please tell your wonderful wife I said hello.
I sure will. Thank you.
That was very cool. Joel, I don't know if you have time for one last question. It just came in the chat, and then, I want to make sure to be careful with your time and so forth and everybody. So do you want me to read it, or you want to go ahead and read the last question?
I think I've got it here. The question, how do I manage your investors, especially with earnings per share less than 50% compared to last year? Yeah, that's a great question, because it's something I kind of wake up and deal with every single day. People don't realize this. And we, this is all public. So before COVID hit, our earnings per share was, I think we did a 3-year plan where we said we're going to be somewhere around the $3.85 a share. And, by the time the year end rolled around last year, it's people are just shocked to realize, we're not even a third of that at this point. And it's just unbelievable what the impact of this thing is. And I think the important messaging there is just that, investors want to know, everybody acknowledges that, hey, we didn't create this issue, but they obviously want to know what we're doing about it. And so much of how, and look, our stock price at the time before this happened was sitting in the mid 80s, actually, at its peak. And then, today we're trading, I think we're ended up today around 61. And that's kind of where, 61 to 65 has been our kind of high point here. And so clearly we're getting somewhat, obviously penalized by the fact that, our earnings are down and our industry is obviously impacted. But the reality of it is that what this is going to be a shocking statement. We were, again, I talked about mid 80s around February. There was a point in the late part of March where our stock hit 28. And we're a company that has a very low, we're typically, our volatility is not particularly high. So our company dropping from 80 to 28 was pretty shocking. And so part of what builds that back up to stock that's sitting in the 60s now is simply talking about the fact that, again, all the things we're doing to manage the crisis, all the things that we have pivoted and done, again, in terms of establishing liquidity. I had investors calling us up and saying, are you guys going to make it? When the stock price sits at 28, the market's pricing you to say, oh my God, I don't know if these guys are going to make it or not. So step one, convincing the investor community, we're going to make this. Then obviously today I have zero concerns about that. But the next step was just the pivots. How do we think about alternative revenue sources and growing our business back? How do we think of reacting quickly and changing our cost structure? How do we think about not just managing through the crisis, but taking advantage of the opportunities that the crisis presents? And then, so ultimately painting a picture for people, and it's not a picture in the sense that it's all real and it's all stuff that we're working on, but how does that ultimately then translate into an organization that is, whatever time frame it's unclear with all the uncertainty what the time frame is, but we're the industry leader in this place. We're going to be the ones that come out of it stronger than anyone else. The opportunity to take share, the opportunity to move this business forward, and just being able to tell that story and then ultimately back it up. When this quarter came around, we beat expectations by 9 cents on an EPS. If somebody had told me 2 years ago, gosh, you guys would be so excited to have a 34-cent earnings per share in a quarter, I would have, what the heck are you talking about? But that's where we are today. The expectation was 25 cents. We hit 34. That's a sizable beat. And those are the kind of things that you just simply, you're not going to solve it all at once. There's no easy button to say, well, I could say this or do this, and I'm just going to fix this valuation issue. But it's quarter after quarter, year after year, setting expectations, telling our story, and then ultimately there are, meeting or beating those results that'll eventually get there. And so it's and I think the other part I would just say, and there's a lot of questions, in the investor community is just like anybody else. They just want the straight scoop. Everything I said about leadership and transparency and just openness. Obviously there's certain things from a Reg FD perspective you can't just say to investors all the time, but they want to know the same stuff everybody else wants to know. What's good? Now let's talk about that. What's bad? Let's talk about that. What are you doing about what's bad? Let's talk about that. And I think at the end of the day, those are the types of things from a credibility standpoint that allow you to have those type of conversations and navigate through that stuff.
Well, Joel, we're so grateful for your time. I warned everyone beforehand that you were a special man, and I think they saw that firsthand today. Really, really fun. It was fun. I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but it was insightful and fun.
Well, look, again, everybody, I really, really appreciate this opportunity to be with all of you today. I certainly wish you all the best of luck. And again, we said at the beginning, congratulations for the investment in yourself. This is that nobody can ever take away this experience you're getting at. Again, that it's just a fantastic business school and the learning that you have. So keep doing that. Look, if there's certainly at any point, there's anything that I or we could do, Richard, we talked about this. I'm certainly happy to do that, and look forward to hopefully maybe sitting to dinner with you guys one day, as I did with Aaron and his wife. Never know.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to having going to a football game with you and Jamie.
Oh man, that's fun. Yeah, I was telling Richard, one of my good buddies, Jamie Roots, is the president of the Texans, and he's a fantastic guy. And he felt so sorry for me one day on a golf course. He gave me one of his golf clubs. So that's the kind of guy he is.
Hey man, listen, really genuinely appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Joel, and I can't wait to meet up with you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
Stay cool. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.